Hoops through life. Hoops through life.
Welcome to another episode of Hoops Through Life, a podcast where we discuss everything related to women's basketball player development, the collegiate recruiting process, and transition from high school to college. I'm your host, Elsbeth Bierman. Our guest today is Julianna Quiring. Julianna is a certified nutrition coach and the founder of Wellness with Julianna. She has experience working as a performance nutrition intern with the Iowa State Athletics Nutrition Performance Team, where she was the lead football nutrition intern. Julianna now works with athletes at all levels, empowering individuals to harness the power of nutrition, making informed choices that propel them towards their full potential. Julianna, I cannot wait to get into it. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. I'm so excited to chat all things nutrition and performance.
Love it. All right. So can you give us just an overview of how you currently work with athletes in your practice?
Yeah, so I do lots of one-on-one coaching with athletes. Right now, I'm partnered with a facility called Hoop Habits here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and we really focus on the whole athlete. So, right, the training's really important, but also what we're doing to prepare ourselves to be able to be successful on the court is so important. So nutrition is where we really dive into that. What I do with the athletes is we do one-on-one nutrition education. I provide them with really great resources. So either that's documents on how to build a performance plate, how to select a really good supplement, what nutrition timing looks like. We go into all those in detail. And then the cool thing is we meet twice a month. So for those athletes, we make sure that the plan we've put into place is working for them, right? There's lots of times where a plan that's going to work for one athlete doesn't work for the other. So making sure that we have those regular checkpoints where we can make sure that they're on the right track. And if something's not working, that we make that change. So that's how I work with athletes right now in my practice.
All right. If you and I were to work together, let's say I am, 14, 15-year-old athlete, and we start to work together. Let's say I know nothing about nutrition. Mm-hmm. I have just, my parents feed me food, and I don't ask questions. I just eat it, right? Where would we begin? What would be those first steps that we would take?
Yeah. So my first thing when we start working together, especially with someone that's 14 to 15, my favorite thing is to get them before they have a lot of knowledge. So that's my favorite because we see a lot on social media, TikTok, Instagram, whether your friends are sending messages about, did you see this, that, or the other thing? So my favorite is when you do know nothing. So that's a great place to be. So I reassure you that we're in a good place. We've got lots of room for growth, and we'll work on those things like individualized plans where you feel really inspired and encouraged about what we're going to do. So we make sure that you're choosing foods that are propelling you for your performance. Now, we don't get into the nitty gritty details. If that's something you're interested, we do registered dietitian. So I'd refer you to someone there. But what's really great about a nutrition coach is we get to walk through all those steps to give you a really good foundation. So we touch on macronutrients, which are protein, carbs, and fat, and what they do in our body. We look at nutrition timing. So what you have when is really important. We think protein, but without the carbs, without the fat, our bodies aren't going to be as successful as it would be if we were to leverage that nutrition timing. So we dive into that. We learn about supplements, probably not quite yet at age 14 or 15, but if we need to rely on some protein powder here or there, that's always great. But we really focus on you as a whole individual and how we can get you to that next level, but do that through you really understanding what you're eating. So like you said, if your parents are putting food on your plate, that is wonderful and we love that. But for you to be able to look at it and say, oh, I know why we're having potatoes, or I know why we're having steak with this, or green beans are a really good thing for the veggies that I want to be having. So for you to look at your plate and understand really the why behind why your parents are putting it on your plate.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about macronutrients and micronutrients.
Yeah.
So for the macronutrients, maybe what are some things that young athletes might not know about how they affect the body and even just what they are in general?
Yeah. So we have 3 macronutrients. You can consider there to be a 4th if we count water. Macro means we need it in large amounts, right? So we need carbs, protein, fat, and then hydration, which comes primarily from water in a balanced diet. So our carbs are going to be quick energy. That's going to be anything like bread, pasta, fruit, any grains, that is going to give us our boost in energy. Also, it gives us sustained energy. So we can pick simple carbs or complex carbs. Your complex carbs are going to tide you over for a bit longer than a quick carb would. So that would be your brown rice, any of those breads that are more multi-grain in those categories. Then when we look to simple carbs, we're thinking fruits, granola bars, any pretzels or quick carbs like that. Those are going to be great for right before performance, heading onto the court into a strength training, cross training session. So that's where we see carbs come into play. Then we look to protein. Protein is what everyone loves, right? We think that's what's going to build our muscles nice and strong. And it does. When we train, we create little micro tears in our muscles. And in order to repair that so that you can see muscle growth, muscle development, we need to fuel our body, and that's where protein comes in. So the building blocks from the protein we're eating, which can be animal meat or even plant-based items like beans, legumes, anything like tofu, those are going to be great sources of vegan protein options. And then we know that without our carbs, though, that muscle mass can't be gaining or happening. So we look to incorporate all of our macronutrients together. And then fat is going to be your long-term energy fuel source. So we don't necessarily want that right before performance because fat is hard to digest, but it's a really great thing to have to give you long-term energy fuel. Have that stored in your body so that you're ready to go for those longer durations of times.
Yeah, so I shouldn't be taking shots of olive oil right before a game.
Yes, no, your stomach would not feel too good. I have had athletes say, I love Chipotle before a game, and I'm not sure how they can tolerate it. Again, everything's so individualized. So making sure that you are seeking out the resources to make sure you know what works well for your body and really leveraging what works well before. Obviously, if Chipotle feels fine, great, but we want to make sure you're getting enough carbs, not too much fat, so then you're having a more balanced diet that helps propel your performance.
Yeah, and the one theme that I saw through each breaking down each one of those was the energy part, right?
Yeah.
But how they impact your energy levels in a different way. So can you maybe repeat that, just how they impact your energy levels from, because the one thing you said was like, oh, quick energy right away or long-term energy. So maybe could you break that down again?
For sure. Yeah. So when we think of carbs, I heard it once as a firework, right? So you're like, the carbs are going into your body and they're lighting off and they're giving you that energy. So we think about shorter term energy. So we want to think of carbs in that sense. And then fat would be more like a slow burning candle, right? It's going to give you energy, but it's going to take a little bit longer to use that energy source within our body. So we want to make sure that we're giving it at the right point in time. So those carbs, you think as you get closer to performance, so whether that's a game or even lifting or cross training, like we had said, that's something where you want to focus more on carbs and less on the other macronutrients. So as it becomes go time, we want more carbs, less fat, and protein can be in moderation.
What are some of maybe common misconceptions that athletes have when fueling their body, with knowing that, like we talked about before, they might see a TikTok or an Instagram or something that gives maybe wellness advice, but maybe that wellness advice is for like a 30-something-year-old person, not a 14 to 18-year-old athlete who is competing at a really high level.
Yeah, for sure. So with what I do with my athletes is we really go back to those basics. So are we fueling our body? Are we hydrating well? What does sleep look like? Are you managing your stress? That's the approach we take, right? Because those are all internal signals our body tells us. If you're tired, you probably had a really intense practice, and recognizing that is important. So that goes to those misconceptions, right? Lots of times in our initial sessions, I'd hear athletes asking, hey, what about this supplement? And what about this one to help me grow faster when working with younger athletes, right? There's science behind things. I'm sure that the supplements have their place and time, but also remembering that the best way we can fuel our body is from food. So we see supplements. We don't always need supplements. There's a place and there's a time for it, but just making sure that you're getting a whole nutrient dense diet in is going to be the best way to help you get faster, stronger, build your endurance. So I'd say supplements are sometimes a misconception, especially when you see it on like a TikTok shop or like an Instagram ad. Those I would have a little bit more hesitation towards. Advice you're receiving when you're looking at Instagram or social media, making sure that it's coming from from a reputable source. So registered dietitians are incredible. They have so many hours put into supervised practice. They have their masters. They're oftentimes working with athletes when they're a sports dietitian. So making sure that if that's the information you're receiving, you can deem that as reputable. But then when we think towards other people you're looking towards, making sure we're not following people who had this great experience themselves within their journey. That's awesome for them. But like you were saying, that's very individualized. That might have happened well for a 30-year-old woman, but we're talking about a 16-year-old girl. So making sure that we're not comparing apples to oranges. So that would be the misconceptions that I've seen when talking to athletes. And then under fueling, that's a big one that I've seen is athletes are so active. And when you're younger, you're burning more calories, and calories is just another way to say how much energy you're spending and how much energy you need to receive back in. So for easy numbers, if you're burning 2,000 calories in a day, making sure we're replenishing it, so up to at least 2,000, so that we're maintaining what we've worked towards. So calories can get kind of a bad term, but really start thinking about it as energy. We need energy to go live out our purpose and go perform at the highest level. So making sure we start thinking about that almost as a math equation, like, okay, I need to get enough energy back in my body. How can I do that? I can give myself energy through the food I'm eating.
Yeah, in the last conversation we had, you did tell me, and I do want to tell this to people because I think this is awesome. You said that with younger athletes, you don't really do the counting. Like they don't do the counting, right? Because you just don't necessarily think that that's the healthiest thing potentially. So you kind of do that on your own, but they're trying to listen to their body. So I just wanted to say that because I think that is a great way to do it.
Yeah.
So that they're not just like super focused on like this one number. It's more of like, how is my body feeling?
For sure.
And then I also wanted to say this too. We keep talking about it's an individualized thing. Everybody's body needs something different.
Yep.
And what would you say, how long should an athlete, quote unquote, experiment with something? Let's say they're feeling super sluggish and you're like, oh, maybe you need an extra snack or something, or you need the specific, maybe you need a little bit of carbs or some protein and that might help. How long should an athlete experiment with something before maybe they can start to feel the effect, and maybe what kinds of things are they looking for? If that's not too broad of a question.
Yeah, no, that's great. So what I would say is when I meet with my athletes, we do every 2 weeks. So if they're telling me, I am so fatigued at practice, like, what do I do, right? We talk about carbs, right? We need more quick carbs. We need more energy. And we'll implement something like a granola bar before practice. How about an applesauce, doing fruit snacks when you have a water break, right? So giving them those strategies. And then they will experiment with that for about 2 weeks. And I often find that if you're really, really consistent with it in those 2 weeks, you will feel a difference. So you'll either feel you have a little bit more energy, or you won't notice that, okay, I'm dragging by the end of practice. So I'd say about that 2-week threshold, but you have to be consistent. Sometimes I have athletes come back to me and say, I don't feel any better. So I ask them, okay, well, what did we do? And we didn't necessarily implement any of the strategies that we talked through, or we did here and there, but it's a consistent effort when it comes to nutrition, because we want to think about we're filling up our energy tank day after day so that we can prepare for those events to come. Something to the point of experimenting with nutrition, do it on practice days. Don't do it on a big tournament weekend, on a game day. That's like, you think about you're practicing your skills. You're not going to try something new that you've never tried before on the court. Same with nutrition, right? We're not going to implement something new on game day. So if I'm meeting with an athlete during school season, we'd have meetings sometimes before basketball games, just how their schedule lined up. And we had a new strategy we wanted to try to help them feel more hydrated, feel better with their energy, stamina. I don't try it tonight. Wait until you've got a day where your body feels good, right? So make sure you're recovered well, because we don't want to attribute anything to like being sore because we tried something new. We're probably sore because you had an intense game. So just really practicing during practice and then performing when it's time to perform.
Is there a common, I don't know. Is there a common strategy that you find helps a lot of athletes that you work with, or is it super individualized and you can't really say?
Yeah, I'd say there are a lot of common patterns or strategies I see that help. And one would be start fueling and hydrating early. So we have a game and we know, oh, we're going to expend more energy on game day than we probably would at a walkthrough, right? And so don't start fueling the next. So let's say you have a game Friday, you're doing your walkthrough Thursday, start fueling Thursday night, right? Start getting your water intake up, start doing those things so that your body has time to adjust. Even better, doing it a couple days before, really getting, but that night before, focusing on your carbs, your protein, healthy fats. That next day, really diving into what does your body need? And that's something you learn as you experiment. So, of course, there's going to be those individualized moments that we've talked about, but if you don't feel great having tons of fat the night before or 2 nights before, because we want to get more towards carbs the night before, know that you can change up that macronutrient distribution. So really just focusing on the signals your body's telling you. But the main thing we see is fueling early, hydrating early. That's really impactful and beneficial for the athletes. And then that day of just being on top of your nutrition. So don't let it get till 11 a.m. and you're like, I didn't have breakfast. What do I do? So we don't want to play catch up when it comes to either practice or performing.
And so then with the hydration piece, an athlete might say, I don't like water. I don't like the taste of water, which is something that maybe athletes don't know about hydration or just common misconceptions about hydration in general.
Yeah, so with hydration, we recommend about half your body weight in ounces for fluid, and that can be anything that comes from like water, juice, electrolytes. We obviously want the priority to be on water since our body is made up primarily of water. We want to give it that resource to be able to use the water that it needs. But some things that we like to incorporate are electrolytes. So that can be there's like trace mineral drops. Those taste really salty. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I think it tastes like pool water a little bit, but really great because it just has the minerals in there. So with that, we can do that when we're feeling a bit dehydrated in the summer after the end of the day, right? But during performance, what's kind of cool about some of those Liquid IV or Drip Drop are two brands that we often recommend for athletes. There's a bit of sugar in there. And sometimes people think, okay, we shouldn't do sugar, right? But it's actually a great way to keep those energy stores up without having to consume something during practice or during a game. But then also the sugar or carbohydrates in there helps the electrolytes get to the bloodstream a bit faster. So that's why we feel hydrated a bit quicker when we have those electrolyte packets versus just plain water.
And then what about, because you didn't mention any sports drinks like Powerade or Gatorade. What about those? What might people not know about those?
Yeah, so they serve their place and if it's during training, fine, we can work with that, right? But I don't love them because they're higher in sugar and lots of them have some different food dyes and just the way that affects our body and our gut health is a bit different. So I like to opt for things that come from like the fruit juice or vegetable coloring to get the color versus any of those food dyes. So that's my take on it. Everyone's going to have a different opinion on it, and there's not a wrong answer, but my preference behind that.
Yeah, and I think also it goes back to experiment and see, right?
Yep.
If you are chugging Gatorades and think you don't feel good, maybe stop chugging Gatorade.
Yes, for sure. Maybe try an electrolyte packet. Try just some water. I had an athlete I worked with that wouldn't necessarily drink Gatorade during training, but found that he was drinking it a bunch. Like the training was done around 3. They did a full day of training. Training was done at 3. And afterwards he would have water, but then later in the evening he'd have Gatorade. And he's like, my stomach just doesn't feel good. But it's because we're having that lots of sugar when we're just sitting there relaxing and chilling. It's great to replenish with carbohydrates, but making sure we're having some protein and fat with that as well to just help stabilize our blood glucose.
All right, so it is almost the thick of AAU season. It's coming up. This is the summertime.
Yeah.
Which means, there's a lot of time on the road, there's hotels. How would you recommend this type of like busy athlete to plan their meals to optimize their performance? I just remember when I played AAU, I mean, how many trips to like Wendy's or McDonald's? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just
Yes.
so easy and convenient. So yeah, what would you recommend?
Yeah. So my big thing with AAU tournaments, with preparing our meals, even outside of that, is we think that when we buy groceries, it's going to be more expensive. It will be at once, right? We're buying groceries for the week or a few days, so it's going to be a bit more expensive. But if you think about how that's divided up over your meals, you can justify it more, right? So when I do my meal prepping, it gets my meals to be way cheaper than even if I was to go to Wendy's or McDonald's. So just knowing that the preparation does help with making sure it's cost effective, making sure you're fueling your body right. But then again, you said you're on the road, right? So with the athletes who are, I'm in Minnesota, so driving to Chicago, I often recommend, hey, put some of those things you know work really well in your bag, or pack an extra bag. You don't need to bring in a whole like grocery bag into the tournament, but keeping it in the car and picking some things out, knowing, hey, I want to do a protein shake in the morning and we've got a travel blender at home, so I'm going to bring that with. And really just kind of piecing those things together. So either bringing your protein powder, or there's the ready to drink protein drinks, which are great in times like that as well. Knowing that if you're at a hotel, lots of them have breakfast, right? So utilizing that as a resource, having some oatmeal for good carbs, they've got eggs, whatever your hotel has. If they don't, that's when I come back to really recommending, like, hey, bring some peanut butter and jelly and chocolate milk, right? And put it in the mini fridge there and use that as your snacks, as breakfast. And then if we're thinking about like lunches, I often recommend sandwich places. So that's going to get you your carbs and your protein with less fat than it would going to fast food. Inevitably, things are going to be fried there, which have more oil, hard to digest. So making sure that you're getting something on more of the leaner side if you're going to go and compete. And then that end of day, once we're done, making sure you really replenish. So making sure you've got either granola bars with, or maybe you bring the instant oatmeal cups. Those are great things to do after. Again, peanut butter and jellies, chocolate milk, really just pairing your macronutrients together well. There's lots of great restaurants out there too that you can go for carbs, protein, and fat that give you more of like a home style cooked meal. When I travel, not necessarily for AAU, but just my personal preference, I like to have control over what I'm eating so that I know I'll feel good. And Instacart is actually a great option. So you think about, okay, I'm going to DoorDash food to the tournament. So oftentimes I recommend, hey, if you know, like, I really thrive when I have X, Y, and Z, and that's at a grocery store, and you don't have a car with, get that Instacart order going and do that right at the beginning of the tournament. And you've got a few staple items to rely on then throughout the tournament and time at the hotel.
Yeah, that's awesome. And have you ever thought about, oh man, I should just go to these AAU tournaments and pitch, I'm going to sell these specific snack items or food items, because I feel like at some of these tournaments, the things that they're selling aren't great either, right? It's a lot of, that processed type of stuff, or I'm just thinking of specific gyms where they might have like fried chicken tenders or something, and fries or whatever.
Yep.
So have you ever thought about doing something like that? Just wellness with a Julianna stand?
Yes, so funny you bring that up. I have a good friend who actually does a meal prep service company in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. It's called Buff Bite Nutrition, and they cook so clean, and they've got protein balls and meals. And we were on a walk the other day, and I was like, you know where you need to go? You need to go to these AAU tournaments, because I was at one, I think it was like 2 or 3 weekends ago, and I was looking at the snack table and I was like, oh man, they don't really have great options here for the athletes to choose from, even if they are putting forth the stuff we talk about in our session. So I have thought about that. I was like, okay, you got to email, you got to do this. I'll get you the information. So yes.
Yeah, that would be great, right? Because that's what I just feel like a lot of times, and this could be lack of education or just not knowing how to plan, which, is a thing too. But if you have a weekend with like 6 games in it, if you're not fueling correctly, by the time Sunday rolls around, which is generally like the championship game, you're probably toast. And I'm sure there's, higher risk of injury, higher risk of all of these other things.
Yes.
So it just seems like you might start out, at the peak, but then as the weekend goes on, if you're not doing what you need to do or what that plan is from a body standpoint, it's just going to break down.
Yeah. Because we also, with that, we don't want to backload calories. So whether that's just for performance or body recomposition, we want to make sure that you're getting it dispersed throughout the day. Your body doesn't do well with, hey, here's all your calories. At the end of the day, that's not how we are designed to function. So when we think about that, we want to make sure sure that you are getting those meals in, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And sometimes it's a shorter window in between games. No matter what your schedule looks like, you obviously don't have as if it was a free Saturday. Okay, I'm going to eat however I'd like. And then lots of times I hear from my athletes, by the time I get to the end of the day, I'm so tired. I don't feel like going home and making a meal and a smoothie and all these things to replenish my energy stores. Granted, they do, but if we were replenishing throughout the entire day, there would be a different result, I guess. You get to Sunday and you feel like, okay, I'm ready to conquer Sunday.
Yeah. I feel like when I would have these conversations with athletes that I would coach, even college athletes, it would be, let's say practice was at 4 p.m. or something. And, oh, coach, I'm feeling really tired. Did you eat today? Oh, no, I forgot.
Right.
Do you find that that's a common thing? Because for me, I've never forgotten to eat.
Yeah. Me either. I love my schedule. I love to have a good breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But yes, I do see that. And I think it comes with the busyness of an athlete's schedule, right? I worked with a girl last summer, but as she was heading to college, so she was going to be a freshman, senior in high school, going into her freshman year of college. And it was totally a learning curve. She had basketball strength training in the morning for 2 hours, drove straight to Hoop Habits, trained there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then went to another training afterwards for more basketball development. And she's like, well, how do I even begin to plan or fuel for this? And when we did our intake, she said, I have great energy. Like, energy is not an issue at all. And we started talking, and I was like, honestly, props to you, because to have great energy and not fuel, that takes a lot, right?
Yeah.
So we started to change the way she was fueling. We'd do something before her strength and performance. We'd have something packed so that on her way to Hoop Habits, she was refueling already for that early. It was still an early morning session because of how early she started, and then had a lunch packed for her time in the car to her next session. And she came back 2 weeks later and was like, I didn't know I could have this much energy.
Yeah.
So yes, I see it a lot where it's like, I have plenty of energy, but I don't eat breakfast and I really don't have dinner. And it's like, okay, let's try this and see how you now define energy. So once you start implementing those things, you quickly find that, oh my goodness, my potential is so much more.
Yeah, it's like you're in a room that you don't realize is pitch black, and then you find the light switch and you're like, oh, all of this stuff was here the whole time.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
All right, what's maybe one, like, quote unquote low hanging fruit option or a habit that you wish every young athlete would implement to improve their nutrition and performance?
Yeah, to piggyback off the last thing you just said, making sure we're fueling. So under fueling is so common in women's and men's sports, making sure that you are eating enough for your energy needs. So athletes, they burn so many calories in a day. So making sure we're putting those back into our body is super important. And oftentimes our body will send us signals. If you're getting to 2 p.m. and you're like, I need a nap, or I'm not going to make it, or your practice doesn't start till 2 p.m., right? Like, how are we going to get through that practice? So really fueling and starting with breakfast. And sometimes athletes will come back and say, so if they're an athlete that doesn't have breakfast, they'll come back and say, okay, I don't love how I'm feeling in the morning when I'm eating breakfast. Well, then we look at what are we eating, right? Sometimes we need to change that macronutrient distribution up a bit, but then even more so, a dietitian I heard once say, when you go to the gym for the first time and you're picking up weights, it doesn't feel good, but you continue to go back because you know it's good for your body. You know developing muscle mass is important. Same with eating, right? The first time you have something before working out, it's probably going to be a little uncomfortable, not necessarily stomach-wise, but maybe thinking through it mentally, like, okay, I'm supposed to eat this and I'm going to feel really good. I've never done this before. I felt good, all the questions, right? But all of a sudden you start getting into that habit. You know it's good to fuel, you're going to start to feel those impacts. So practicing getting your nutrition in on a regular basis is going to be really, really important. And I would say is like the best thing to implement for athletes.
Yeah. And the consistency point too, right? Don't just fuel for a day or two and think, I don't feel any different. It's like, you got to give it a chance.
Yes. Let your body get used to that and really start to thank you, like, oh my gosh, I have energy, or my stomach isn't grumbling in the middle of practice, or I don't need a nap right when I get back. Granted, there are going to be days, even if you are fueling to perfection, your body it's going to go through different things, whether it's hotter out or how your body feels, if you're maybe a little bit under the weather. So don't beat yourself up too if that's something where, okay, I have been fueling, but now I'm not feeling the best. Let it have a little bit of time, really sit with that and learn what your body needs. And lots of times that will pass pretty quickly.
So what about, let's say that it's just one game. I'm thinking more of or even high school athletes too, but you have one game in a day, whether it be at nighttime or mid-afternoon. What's that time frame that might be kind of that sweet spot for a bigger meal or a lighter meal or that fuel game day?
Yeah, so 3 to 4 hours before eating is when we say it's a good time to include all your macronutrients. So carbs, protein, and fat, and the hydration. So with that, we don't want to overload on fat. So keeping fat to a minimum, but we can really focus on protein. So we can have protein because protein is going to help us stay full for longer. Instead of having all carbs, you're going to be like, okay, well, I'm hungry again. So 3 to 4 hours before, we can focus on all three macronutrients with a priority on carbs and protein. As you get closer to go time, so now like an hour to 2 hours before, we're thinking carbs with minimal protein. So a granola bar or granola and a little bit of Greek yogurt. Typically that has like 12 grams of protein in it, which is a great rule of thumb for beforehand. And then as you get that less than 30 minutes before, really just focusing on carbs. So that turns to like reading food labels, and that can be a lot, but you want to just look at the carbs, the protein, and the fat, and you can use your best judgment, right? If it's got 15 grams of fat, that's a no-go for before. But if it's got 30 grams of carbs and 5 grams of protein and very little fat, that's a great thing to start implementing that hour to 2 hours before.
Mm-hmm. Do you have you said a granola bar a couple times. Like, do you have a favorite one?
The ones that my athletes love the most for like quick carbs and easy to digest would be the Z bars. There's like the iced apple oatmeal one, and I think that's the one that everyone's like, yep, that one's really, really good. Or the Nutri-Grain bars. Those have a little bit of the more like filling on the inside. I prefer to just do more fruit based for myself. So if I'm going to go and work out, I know, okay, I'm going to do a banana or I'm going to do an orange. Those have great carbs in them and a little bit of fiber to help slow that entry into the bloodstream so it's not hitting me all at once. But everybody's a little bit different and what they can tolerate and what they prefer.
I work with primarily female athletes.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to talk a little bit about, a little bit of female specific nutrition, because this might be something that female athletes might not even be aware of. I know that, whenever they start their menstrual cycle, I'm sure they start to feel those shifts in energy levels throughout the month. But how does a female athlete's menstrual cycle kind of affect the way that they should approach nutrition and their energy levels?
Yeah, so my role with everything with nutrition is to educate. So if you feel like you're experiencing symptoms that are not normal for your menstrual cycle, please go and see a physician, your primary care practitioner, or even a dietitian. So dietitians work really closely with athletes who experience low energy availability, and they really help give you a specific plan that's more aligned with exactly what your body needs based on either lab results or just talking through the symptoms you're having. So my role is to educate, which I'll give a little bit of information here, but just making sure if you're feeling any of those symptoms that you go and speak to someone who's qualified to help you there. But the first half of a woman's menstrual cycle is when we're in the follicular and ovulation phase, and we don't need as much energy in that first half of our cycle. The second half, our body actually demands more calories. And there's this stat that I had written down that in the second half of your cycle, you naturally burn 89 to 279 more calories per day and have an increased appetite. So that doesn't mean that during that part of your cycle, you're working out more and that's why you're burning more calories, but your body needs more calories to be able to produce a menstrual cycle. So lots of times we'll see that a athlete has even like lost their menstrual cycle due to not having enough fuel in their body. Again, that's a great time to go see a dietitian and see your primary care physician just to make sure that everything's okay and they can give you really good guidance there. But that just goes to show the need our body has for enough energy. So really making sure we're kind to our body and giving it what it needs during those times of the month.
Yeah. And I think that's great to know too, because I know that myself and some other of my friends who were also female athletes, when we didn't know a lot of these things and we didn't research it, or maybe there wasn't a lot of readily available content for us to read about it, we'd just be like, dang, why is this? And we kind of pieced together like, oh, around this time and this time, but it was never really something where we could definitively say, or we're like, what? We kind of felt like it was something with us. Like, why are we
Yeah,
feeling that way? And so I think it's important. It's an important thing to start to just recognize the signs of your body and this has been the theme, I think, throughout this whole episode
for sure.
is just like tuning into yourself. How is your energy?
Mm-hmm.
What does it feel like in what might your body need in this
Yeah.
moment? Because like you said, if you're feeling sluggish on certain days of your menstrual cycle consistently,
Mm-hmm.
then it's like, oh wow, during this time I might need, a nap, like you said, or I
Yeah.
might need apple Z bar. I can't remember. Is it
Right.
apple
Yeah.
cinnamon Z
Yeah.
bar?
Apple.
I
I
don't
think it's
know.
iced apple
I
cinnamon or
know.
something. Yeah.
And just to like just experiment and try to figure it out, and you're not going insane. Like
Right.
this is
Right.
your
For
body
sure.
and it's just the way that it is, and just try to figure out what you might need at different times.
Yeah. And that's it. You brought up naps, right? And that's so important to like listen to your body. Obviously, you can't tell your coach, "Hey, I'm not coming today. I'm napping. I'm on my menstrual, I'm on my period." But I'm gonna like you can listen to those signs and maybe you know that, hey, instead of like maybe you really enjoy going on a walk. Maybe instead of a walk when you're feeling that fatigue set in, know that, hey, my body, it's doing a lot of really wonderful things for me. I'm gonna lay down, I'm going to rest, I'm going to relax for a little bit and honor what my body's telling me. So that's a big thing where it's just, you don't need to feel ashamed of like taking it a little bit lighter outside of those practice times when your body needs it.
Yeah, and I'll double down with that and say this doesn't mean you can't perform
For
at
sure.
at a peak level.
Yeah,
You can perform at a peak level at any point during that cycle. It's just about, are you preparing your body the way
for
that it
sure.
needs to be prepared?
Yep. And using the times, like you said, outside of training to be able to prepare your body. So we have a really good, like you have resources out there. And there's a book that I love. It's called In the Flow. And that gives you these different resources of like when your creativity is the highest. So, right, like when can you utilize your strengths from your period? You don't need to look at it as a weakness. You can go and perform. You can go and be your best self in any phase, but it's really tapping into like, okay, how can I show up as my best self during this portion of my cycle?
Yeah, I've read that book. I like it.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really good. Super insightful.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
All right. I have the last couple questions that I ask all the guests. What book or podcast would you recommend every young athlete read or listen to?
I do love In the Flow. I think that's a really good book.
Yeah.
If you're a woman and you're in that phase of your menstrual cycle, there's lots of valuable insight in the book. And it's set up in a cool way where like you can jump from part to part. So like, okay, how do I want to fuel for this so that I can perform at my highest level? Another book I really love is called Glucose Revolution. And that is all about how to incorporate those carbs into our body so that we can receive the benefit from it, right? So making sure that we're having it at the right time to go perform. It's not necessarily a sports performance book, but I think all those things about nutrition you can tailor very easily to how you're performing and maybe those symptoms that you're feeling as well.
Yeah. So the In the Flow, it's by Alyssa Vitti. I don't know who the other book is
Yes.
by.
Oh, I
It's
don't remember the name right off the top of my head. I think Jess is her name.
yes, Jessie. Oh, I don't know how to pronounce her
I
last
was gonna
name.
say, I don't either.
Okay. All
But
right.
really great book.
Yeah. If you could make one rule that all, basketball trainers or coaches had to follow, what would it be and why?
Yeah. I would say normalizing or allowing your athlete to fuel during practice or during a game. Obviously, it's all with like the athlete has to come prepared. They can't be like, I'm leaving to go get a snack. But if
My
they,
DoorDash is
yeah,
here.
yeah, I'm gonna go enjoy a meal. But when talking with athletes, I found that hey, like we have 2 to 3 hour practices. I'm feeling really fatigued in the middle of it. So they know that, hey, I've practiced all summer with doing applesauce in between, and that feels really, really good for me. So making that normal and okay to be able to let your athletes fuel, obviously not letting it take away from practice, but like at a water break, if they have an applesauce with, not that many would say you can't do that, but just making sure that the athlete knows that that's okay. Because sometimes when I make that recommendation, I obviously say, make sure you talk to your coach and stuff, because I don't want to control their practice. But they'll be like, okay, are you sure my coach is going to let me do this? So just making sure that it's a safe environment for them to really listen to their body and really give it what it needs. So if that's a bit of a boost of energy with a little snack, that would be something that's okay.
Yeah, it makes me think about when I was younger playing like youth sports and somebody would bring like orange slices in the middle of the game or something.
Yeah, right, right. Yes, for sure. So just having that like as like an atmosphere that is okay. Yeah.
All right. If anybody wants to find out more about you and the type of support you provide for athletes, where can they do that?
Yeah, so you can go to Instagram, and my Instagram is Wellness with Julianna. I'm kind of rebranding, so my business is going to be Sweet Foundation. So that also can be something you look for if you're typing it into like Google, is sweet-foundations.com. So that's where a lot of the information is on my business.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you aren't already, I would highly recommend subscribing to the podcast so you can get updated once new episodes are dropped. If you're a fan of the show, go ahead and leave a review. It really helps spread the word to more athletes, parents, and coaches. Now, if you have any questions for myself or future guests, feedback, or you're curious on how we can work together to help you reach your basketball goals, let's have a conversation. Feel free to email me at l@hoopsthroughlife.com today to set that up. That's EL@HOOPSTHROUGHLIFE.com. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.